From cruising down Sunset to winding down Lombard and all points in between. It's the John Phillips Show.
And we continue at 2:06 in the afternoon on this Jimmy Buffett Friday. It's the John Phillips Show. Mr. Randy Wang's across the glass.
Here's a sign of confidence for the city of Oakland. One of the first acts as mayor, Barbara Lee, is going to give raises to her staffers.
Quite frankly.
Well, if there's any city in the state of California, or for America for that matter, that's doing a bang-up job, it's Oakland.
I said, hell no, baby boy. Let me get up on out of here.
And by bang up, I literally mean explosions.
Oh, my God. They melted the basketball court.
I was there on 4th of July last year. I'm well aware.
Who else are we going to call Superman?
800-222-5222 is the telephone number, 1-800-222-5222. It is our pleasure to welcome our next guest to the program. He is the co-host of the Too Many Lawyers podcast, which you can download wherever you download your favorite podcast. He's also the ABC News legal analyst, Royal Oakes. Royal, welcome.
Hey, thanks a lot, John.
Well, thanks so much for being here on this Jimmy Buffett Friday. Let's start out with some national news that has people just scratching their heads saying, what in the world is going on here? Where a federal judge earlier in the week halted the deportation of the family members of the man from Egypt who is charged with an anti-Semitic attack in Boulder, Colorado. This came after the White House went on social media and said that the family's deportation was imminent. How exactly can a federal judge stand in the way of the executive branch of government deporting people who are provably here illegally, particularly after Daddy committed an act of terrorism?
Yeah, great question. And it kind of relates to the sort of ongoing debate about national injunctions. Should a single federal trial court judge be able to say, hey, IRS or Immigration Department or ICE, I don't like what you're doing. My decision is going to affect everybody from sea to shining sea, even though I'm just one of hundreds and hundreds of federal judges. But the specific answer to the question is, you know, the judge steps in and says, I don't think these folks have been given their due process rights. I don't think they've had proper legal proceedings, and, you know, you're penalizing family members. Those are the kinds of things that the judge is relying on. But it's just not going over. I don't think it's going to go over legally, and certainly in terms of public opinion. I mean, you know, this is one bad guy. This, you know, attack injuring 15 people during a pro-Israel demonstration. So it's amazing that he can get away with it at least for a while. But, you know, whenever a trial judge does something, whoever doesn't like it, boom, they go right up to the Court of Appeals. Of course, the Ninth Circuit's pretty famously left of center. But then the U.S. Supreme Court is at the top of the pyramid. Yeah, they're busy and they're getting ready for their vacation on July 1, but they're always there to reverse injustices committed by the lower court judges.
What's the argument that the judge gives? You mentioned due process. Okay, so I guess if the judge said, look, we may have this wrong. They may, in fact, be here legally. They may have, in fact, been born in this country or naturalized, or one of their parents was an American citizen. The federal government has presented information that proves that none of that is true. I don't even think that's being disputed by the family. The family, to my knowledge, has not produced any information that conflicts with what the Immigration and Customs Enforcement Agency is saying. So I don't think any of those facts are in dispute. These people are here illegally.
Yeah, and you're absolutely right. I mean, his wife, she's got a pending work visa application that the whole family filed for asylum a couple of years ago. So their lawyers are arguing that these pending applications, they all have to be resolved, and they entitle them all to remain in the United States until their cases are adjudicated. But this is just the formula for failure that a lot of people have been following for years. You know, somebody comes across the border and they say, "Oh my gosh, look, 100 yards back, the cavalry's coming. They're gonna kill me." And you know, if there's an imminent danger situation, sure, but 99% of the time there is no imminent danger. Instead, what the U.S. government says, "Oh, You think that you're in trouble if you go home? Well, then here, take this piece of paper. It'll tell you when and where to report for your asylum hearing 6 months from now. We're kind of busy. And then everybody melts into the general population. So they just don't really care about enforcing the immigration law. I mean, this family entered on tourist visas a couple of years ago. It expired. Then Solomon files for asylum. His work authorization expires. You know, the DHS has established they're unlawfully present. They're subject to immediate removal. Then, plus, of course, he gets involved in this horrible attack, and the DHS is investigating whether his family had prior knowledge or involvement. The Homeland Security, Kristi Noem, is saying the authorities are looking at the extent of the family's awareness. But bottom line is, you've got some judges that are very flexible about how long people can stay and whether all the T's have been crossed and the I's have been dotted. And it just, as a result, is like tap dancing in molasses to try to get rid of bad guys through the immigration laws.
Are these judges, these federal judges who are trying to block these deportations from happening, basically employing the same tactics that the opponents of the death penalty use, which is, let's make the process go on as long as possible. Let's run up the costs as much as we can. Let's gum everything up that we can gum up and then say, look, we're not opposed to the death penalty ideologically. We just think it's a waste of money because look how long it takes. Look how much money it costs. There are cheaper ways of handling this. Let's just dump the death penalty and go to life in prison. It seems like these judges aren't really disputing the facts. They aren't really trying to overturn the ultimate result. What they're trying to do is to make it take as long as possible, cost as much as possible, be as painful as possible, so they can either outweight the Trump administration or they can get the Trump administration to just cry uncle.
Oh, you're absolutely right. What you have is ideology by the judges and other people, politicians, trumping what's right and what the law is. And it happens at the judicial level where judges do this. It also happens at the political level. I mean, just think of Gavin Newsom and DA George Gascon. They have a personal objection to capital punishment. They ignore the fact that California, deep blue state, has twice in the last several years said, we favor capital punishment, but instead it's not on my watch. You know, San Quentin is now a meditation center. It's nutty. I mean, Rose Byrd back in the day was Chief Justice of the California Supreme Court, and she got her comeuppance. She voted against capital punishment in 55 straight cases, always coming up with, there's a technical problem, and the judge fell asleep, and this was discrimination. And she never admitted that she would never, ever vote for capital punishment. She just came up with a reason to say, oh, no, I'm going to send it back to the trial court. And as a result, the voters got wind of it, and they kicked her out. They recalled her, and she was out of a job. But, you know, we don't really have that vehicle here anymore. People don't use the recall that much. And California is so deep blue that the judges and people like Newsom and Gascon, fortunately gone, can get away with it.
I know that federal judges don't ever have to put their name on the ballot unless they want to be a candidate for some other office. But it's not like they live in an alternate universe. They're reading the same newspapers we're reading. They're watching the same television programs we're watching. They're listening to the same radio programs that we're listening to. They're aware of what the election results were in November, and immigration was a huge part of it, particularly in those swing states where a lot of ads on the television had to do with curbing illegal immigration and deporting people who are here illegally. Do you think these judges care where public opinion is? Because sometimes, I mean, you look at the Supreme Court, for example, when FDR was in office with the New Deal programs where they were striking those down as unconstitutional, right and left. But they recognized, oh my, the public wants these New Deal programs, and if we continue to strike them down, he's going to come after us. He's going to pack the court. He's going to expand the court. There's going to be some sort of retribution that is coming our way. And then they, over time, started evolving the way they saw these things and started voting with him. What do you make of what's going on politically on the court right now?
I don't think the judges care at all. For one thing, you have to think about, on the federal side, who are these judges? They are appointees of the President of the United States. He gets to appoint the Supreme Court justices, the judges of the circuit courts of appeal, like the Ninth Circuit, and the judges at the trial court. And they are, as you say, lifetime appointments. It is shocking and scary what percentage of the time a judge's decision in a high-profile case is absolutely consistent with what the guy who appointed him would like him to say. And I'm not dumping on Democrats here. The same thing applies to Republican appointees. And it's not supposed to be that way. I don't know what the answer is. I mean, robots, AI, something, consensus of, 8 judges, and they have to agree, 4 appointed by a Republican, 4 by the other. I don't know what the answer is, but currently we have a real mess. Now, at least with the politicians, sometimes they lick their finger, hold it up in the wind, and as you've talked about, we see Gavin Newsom behaving a little differently because he's got his eye on the 2028 ball, and suddenly the homeless encampments are coming down, and the trans decisions and all sorts of other things. He obviously doesn't want to mess up his campaign. I personally think he may just let the Menendez stay in prison, even though the parole board probably is going to string him, because Newsom doesn't want a question in a press conference in May 2028. Governor Newsom, you're running for president. People are concerned about crime. You let out these 2 guys that shotgunned their parents, including the mom, who hadn't done the molestation. How do you explain it? I don't think he wants that awkward question, so he may let them stay. So, yeah, unfortunately, politicians and judges both team up to do what they feel like, and only rarely do they deviate because maybe they're worried about losing a job.
Who's AI going to replace first? Major League Baseball umpires or judges?
It's the umpires for sure. I think minor league has a pilot program where balls and strikes are called by AI, and the umpire he gets it in his earbud and he calls the strike, and so Leo DeRocher is not going to be arguing with him. He's going to be looking up at the clouds.
Here's my prediction. It'll be the umpires first, but if Angel Hernandez was a judge and not an umpire, it would be the judges.
I like that.
We're speaking with Royal Oakes, co-host of the Too Many Lawyers podcast, which you can download wherever you download your favorite podcast. Royal, the California Senate approved this week a measure that would allow inmates sentenced to life without parole the opportunity to request an early release if their crimes were committed before the age of 26. So the same legislative body that didn't want to make it a felony if you're buying or selling 16 or 17-year-olds for the purpose of sex now wants to go easy on people who are in prison for murder. What the hell is going on?
Well, what you're seeing is abolish prisons light. We've seen ever since the George Floyd situation and the rise of the woke, an effort to solve this carceral state issue where we're just criminalizing too many things and we got too many people behind bars. When what's really going on is a lot of folks are very concerned that we have a racist society and specifically a racist criminal justice system. The lawyers, the cops, the prosecutors, the judges, they're racist, and therefore that's why more people in prison are people of color than you would expect based on the percentage of people of color in the population. And the answer is not abolish prisons, but do it in a light way by giving more and more opportunities for people to get out of jail. And this is fascinating because a lot of people are going to hear what you're saying, and they're going to think, oh, gee, don't we already have this business about, if you committed a crime before age 26, so your brain wasn't fully formed, you have a right to ask for parole, even though when you were convicted, you were told you get life without parole because what you did was so horrible and heinous and you blew up a boatload of nuns or whatever you did. Now, the reason it's familiar is because in the Menendez case, the way they're asking for resentencing and getting it is they are relying on a 2018 law in California that said, if you commit murder and you're told life without parole, goodbye, have a nice day, after 25 years in prison, if you did it when you were under 26, you get to ask for parole anyway. Now, this is a similar approach. This new law you're talking about, Senate Bill 672, it doesn't relate to resentencing, which is what the Menendez brothers want. Instead, it just relates to any time you were told go away forever, whatever the crime is, murder or kidnapping or whatever, you may ask for parole. Well, is that appropriate? Should we really be letting people out? When people talk to me about the carceral state, I think to myself, do we really have too many people in prison? The fact is, if you talk to the criminologists, over 50% of all crimes go unsolved. So all these victims, their lives have been ruined and the families have been wrecked because of unsolved crimes. Doesn't that suggest maybe we should double the number of cops and double the number of prisons? And of course, fight racism wherever you can. But, whoever is caught and is convicted should do time. Yeah, that's my long answer. The short answer is, yeah, we've got so much incentive to reduce the number of people behind bars. You're going to see more and more laws like this saying, oh, let them out. They served enough time.
I like the way you think, and I think they're brain dead. We're speaking with ABC News legal analyst Royal Oakes. And finally, Royal, Transportation Secretary Sean Duffy released a scathing report exposing what he said is the unfeasibility of California's long-troubled high-speed rail project and is threatening to pull the plug on a plan that already has the federal government on the hook for almost $7 billion, while Californians are underwriting an additional $9 billion. Duffy said that the federal government is moving to terminate around $4 billion it has currently obligated to the project unless the High-Speed Rail Authority can prove it's tenable. Basically, what Duffy is saying is that the federal government has been bringing in the Brinks trucks for this project, and they haven't been fulfilling their obligations. If we've been paying them to lay track to get this train up and functioning and operational, and they're not fulfilling their obligations, is that fraud?
Well, fraud, of course, is such an unpleasant word, and it requires climbing into somebody's head and showing that they intended to steal, and that may well be the case. Even without having to prove fraud, the federal government has a right to stop money or ask for money back if they can, if the California folks pushing the bullet train can't demonstrate that they have a solid plan, that they've made progress, and that the money is being well spent. I mean, as you know, the original vision here was, high speed, San Francisco to LA in 3 hours. And now the budget has ballooned from $33 billion to over $100 billion. And the only construction is Merced to Bakersfield, which some people call the train to nowhere. Now, that's harsh if you live in Merced or Bakersfield or in between. I'm sure Wasco's a really nice town. But bottom line is, we have a right, the federal government has a right to pull the plug on this. They really should. And as to whether anybody can prove fraud, who knows? Maybe no federal court or agency has actually proven that or really taken serious steps to try to establish fraud. But yeah, if this lasts much longer and the politicians still refuse to just stop it, pull the plug, then maybe a fraud allegation would get their attention.
Royal, what's coming up on the next Too Many Lawyers podcast?
Oh, Sean Combs, of course, is on a lot of people's minds. And I love the latest revelation. One of the accusers said, well, Sean dangled me over a balcony. And I'm thinking to myself, I don't know if you know this showbiz story, but, when Sid Caesar had the big show in the 50s, Mel Brooks was one of his writers, and Sid didn't like what Mel was doing. And he allegedly dangled Mel outside a balcony as well. Does that make Sid a mobster? And the judge even said to the prosecutors, why is it relevant that Sean Combs, dangled this lady over the balcony? So I think there could be an overcharging problem. Clearly, Sean Combs is not a good man. Beats women up. We've got it on video. But is he really a crime boss? Is he a RICO racketeering criminal enterprise guy? I'm just thinking the jury may be scratching their heads at this point and asking, maybe there was a little overcharge. So we're going to talk about that on Too Many Lawyers.
I think Diddy held her over the balcony because he thought she was one of Michael Jackson's kids.
Yeah. That's a great idea.
Royal Oakes, everyone.
The Michael Jackson defense.
Work for him. ABC News legal analyst, co-host of the Too Many Lawyers podcast, which you can download wherever you download your favorite podcast. Royal, thanks so much for stopping by.
You bet. Thanks.
800-222-5222 is the telephone number, 1-800-222-5222. What a week it has been in the world of politics, especially when you're talking about Trump v. Elon. Here to talk to us about that is our pal, who is the editor of the California Political Review, the author of Taxofornia, which is available online at Amazon.com, and former Reagan administration official in the Commerce Department, Jim Lacy. Jim, thanks so much for joining us.
Always happy to be with you, John, particularly on a Friday.
Oh, Jimmy Buffett Fridays are the best, aren't they?
Yeah, you got it.
All right, so I've enjoyed watching the mainstream media the last couple of days because they're clutching their pearls, watching Donald Trump and Elon Musk go at each other. And oh boy, yesterday on Twitter, it was something to see. However, and I'll be fully honest here, I would prefer that they not fight in public like it's some sort of teenage couple breaking up. That being said, in the world that we live in now, the only people who don't see someone have a glass of Chardonnay thrown in their face in between ads for Tide are people who don't have cable. This is just part of Americana these days. And you go back to the founding of the country when they were setting up our system of checks and balances, and Alexander Hamilton was writing about it in the Federalist Papers. It's supposed to be a food fight. It's supposed to get messy. Feelings are supposed to get hurt. No one's supposed to get 100% of what they want. And through the fighting and through the acrimony and the yelling and the screaming and the crying and the hair pulling and the nasty things said on Twitter, you end up with a result that where no one gets all of what they want, but everyone gets something they can basically live with. What do you make of this fight, and do you think it's out of character for where this democracy typically is?
Well, I'm not so sure it's out of character because in your comments there, you're talking about what basically is the immediate aggravation of politics and each other. You know, it comes to mind that when Alexander Hamilton might have had a disagreement with Thomas Jefferson, it might take a couple weeks to get his comment over to Jefferson because of the Postal Service, because he didn't have the internet, right? He didn't have X, you know. And so if you imagine this debate that's going on today between Trump and Musk as going back to our founding fathers' day, sort of Hamilton musical era, that would probably be a year's worth of exchanges, which we get done in 24 hours. But, you know, it's to get down to the seriousness of it, though, these are two guys that are kind of fighting with each other, and a lot of it has to do with ego and power. But when you look at the rest of the nation, this has not been a good thing for the nation. Yesterday, Tesla was down 14% on the stock market, but it wasn't just Tesla that was down. It was DJT, you know, that's the stock symbol for Truth Social. That was down 11%. Now, they're back up today. There's been a rebound because, I believe in part because Fox News was reporting, and it really hasn't happened, and it may not happen, that Trump and Musk are going to talk to each other. Look, John, you know, and I think your listeners know, I support Trump and his breathtaking policies. I think he's doing wonderful things with Doge and with the economy, trying to deal with these deficits. I think that he's improving our national defense. He's definitely fixed the border. He's definitely improved crime. But that said, I don't think everybody needs to be a sycophant to support Trump. And what started this problem was Musk. Musk started it, but Musk started it by basically expressing concerns about the big, beautiful bill. I personally think that it's okay for him. It would have been okay for him to express his concerns, and for Trump, God bless him, to just shut up about him and let Musk have his opinion. He's got a First Amendment right to it anyway, and he's done so much for the Trump administration vis-a-vis Doge that maybe Trump should have given him a pass. But Trump came in, he couldn't let it go. That's our Donald Trump. And as a result, it started to go into this back and forth. You know, there's things I disagree with Trump. You know, we talk about his tax deduction, you know, his big tax bill in 2017. I don't know about you, John. I didn't save any taxes because I lost my SALT deduction, which is a huge deduction state and local tax deduction and then a reduction in mortgage interest. That's a big, big thing in California. But that because I didn't end up benefiting that well from the tax reform, it doesn't mean I don't support Trump. And Musk started out in all of this, of course, when he left, answering questions of the legacy media about where he disagreed with Trump. And there is some audio and maybe even some visual of Musk saying, I think it's to ABC News or one of the legacy media, something like, well, I really don't want to criticize him. I really don't want to, be put into a situation where I have to go against policy. But then he started to get into this big, beautiful bill stuff. So I think there's a lot to be said for the big, beautiful bill. Maybe we can get into that a little bit later as we have our session to be able to talk. But I got to say this, the New York City comptroller, who I totally would disagree with politically, but who oversees the pension plan for the New York City employees, they lost $150 million yesterday for their pensions. And they lost it because of this stupid fight. And what I fear is that if this thing proceeds, what you're going to do is have Trump piss off Musk even more. And all Musk has to do is strategically spend a few $1 million on House seats and a few tens of $1 million on Senate seats to flip the congressional majority back to the Democrats, which we don't want to do. Musk is a national treasure. Through SpaceX, through the Boring Company, his taking over of X so that was no longer a propaganda tool of the left, he is a national treasure. He's not perfect. Certainly Trump is not perfect. But together, they are so powerful and good for our nation, they got to get this thing put back together, or we're going to lose our Republican majority in the Congress, and Trump's last 2 years are going to be just awful.
I said yesterday that they kind of remind me of Shaq and Kobe, where you have these two greats who, when they play together, they can't lose, and they're exciting to watch, and it's something that will be talked about for generations. But you have two big egos like that in the same building, and they're just going to bump heads at some point. A lot of people thought it would have happened sooner rather than later, but at least it lasted this long, so Doge was able to do what they did, and we were able to get some of those ideas on the paper. Now, Jim, I'd like you to put this in the historical perspective for us, because you were there, not just in the Reagan administration, but in the Commerce Department in the 1980s, fighting basically this fight back then, trying to rein in government, trying to rein in spending. And that is the argument essentially that Musk is making here, that we had an opportunity to really slash government, to really rein in the spending, to really balance the books. And we moved the ball forward, but we didn't move the ball forward enough. And you don't get these opportunities too often. Can you explain the knife fight that goes on in that city, in that district, the District of Columbia, even if you're elected with a smashing mandate, as Ronald Reagan was in the 1980s, to cut the size of government, because everyone who's getting their take at the till is out to get you, and all of them are armed with knives?
Yeah. Well, this is instructive in the passage of the Kemp-Roth bill in the first year of the Reagan presidency, which was a tax deduction. It was one of the biggest tax cuts in history of the United States up to that point. And the legacy media went wild, because you have to remember, although Reagan had a Republican Senate, he had to deal with Tip O'Neill, and he had to deal with a Democrat majority in the House. But many of those Democrats in the House came from districts that Reagan had actually won in the presidential election against Jimmy Carter. Well, the legacy media came right out to cause division. And what they did is they referred to the Democrats who voted, one of whom was Phil Gramm, a Democratic congressman from Texas who ultimately changed his party because he believed in free market economics. But one of the things that they called them was the Reagan robots. So the Tip O'Neill had 20 or 30 Reagan robots in his caucus that were going to do anything that Reagan wanted. Well, it was not easy to pass the Kemp-Roth bill, but it got passed. And the Congressional Budget Office and many economists at the time were putting the same stuff out. You know, the Congressional Budget Office right now has a score on Trump's BBB, his big beautiful bill. They have a score that says that it's going to add $2.4 trillion to the national debt, which Trump is disputing. They had the same type of information going out there about Kemp Roth to try and stop. These liberal Democrats fight hard. They have long knives. They've aided by legacy media. And the last thing that they want is to reduce government spending or even slow the growth of government spending, which happened under Reagan, and cut taxes. But what happened was Kemp Roth passed, and tax revenue actually went up. It didn't go down. And this is why the big, beautiful bill is not what the Congressional Budget Office says. And I agree with Larry Kudlow, who was an economist in the Reagan administration, and he now has a show on Fox Business. If you account for the expansion of the economy as a result of these tax cuts and this big, beautiful tax cut bills coming in, you're actually going to have deficit reduction over a 10-year period that will be real. But the Congressional Budget Office isn't recognizing it because they don't score based on that type of growth. But it's happened in the past. You can point to Kemp Roth. You can even go back to the John F. Kennedy administration, John Phillips, where he cut capital gains taxes, and as a result of that, the economy expanded. They cut capital gains taxes, but what happened was more people then took capital gains over the nation, which meant that the tax revenue actually went up. And this is where we have this famous statement from John F. Kennedy justifying an across-the-board tax cut by saying a rising tide lifts all boats. So, yes, the knives are out. They said that Reagan's tax bill was going to increase the deficit. It didn't. He slowed the growth of government under the Reagan administration and could have reversed it if he had complete control of Congress. Reagan didn't have that luxury as Trump does. I'm sorry that Musk went out and expressed himself, but he's entitled to his comment, but we got to get these bills passed. This is a golden opportunity to pass this bill, and then they can come back and they can start instituting the DOGE cuts and turn to more government, reducing government spending. But both of them have to cool it. And sometimes Trump can be again, I'm a great Trump supporter. I want to get a bunch of your listeners mad. But sometimes Trump is his worst enemy. I mean, he opens his big fat mouth when he shouldn't. And this is not only risking this bill, it's risking a continuation of the congressional majority. And the fight is hurting people. It's hurting people at the stock market. It's recovering today, but we don't want these IRAs going down. We want these pension funds to go up, up, up. And they will if these guys put their act together and Trump can implement his program.
Last question before you go. What do you say to these people who think that this is a short-term quarrel and those two are going to be eating Big Macs and making up before too long?
Yeah, I don't think it's a short-term quarrel. I think that what they have to do is find a way to agree to disagree. There's been too much that's been exchanged here for these two to be in a visual sitting down, in the White House mess, eating the White House meatloaf that Chris Christie loved so much when he was in Trump's favor. But they can agree to disagree, and you don't have to be a Trump sycophant in this case. I support Trump, but I also support Musk. I recognize what he's done fabulous things. As we don't want to have a situation as a result of this fight that the U.S. becomes even more reliant on Russia vis-a-vis the Russian rockets to explore space. We need Elon Musk to help make that American and to help accelerate that exploration. So I think that they've shown deep division. Some said that it was predictable because they both are big personalities and they both are big, powerful people. But for the benefit of the country across the board, legislation, policy, people's retirement accounts, our relationship with foreign nations, having the benefit of these wonderful automobiles and other ideas, the neurological inventions that Musk is bringing forth, they gotta, for the good of the country, they both need to just put it in a box, tie it up, and throw it off the Santa Monica Pier.
Jim Lacy, author of the book Taxifornia, available online at Amazon.com. He's also editor of the California Political Review. Jim, thanks so much for stopping by on this Jimmy Buffett Friday. Have yourself a wonderful weekend.
Thanks a lot. You too. Bye.
It's the John Phillips Show. If you'd like to email the show, you can do so at johnnydon'tlikeshow@gmail.com. That's johnnydon'tlikeshow@gmail.com. And Randy, you and I are about to clock out of the plant here, but if you want to keep listening to us all weekend long, that's easy to do.
All you got to do is get the podcast of this show. Search for the John Phillips Show wherever you get your podcasts, whether it's the Apple Podcasts app, iHeart, Spotify. Search for the John Phillips Show. Hit subscribe. You can download all the episodes. You could also
do a Google on YouTube.
Do a Google on the YouTube, because the John Phillips Show gets automatically posted to the YouTubes, and you can also get one of our apps. Whether you're listening in Southern California on the KABC app or in Northern California on the KSFO app, you can download all the podcasts there, and it's a great way to stream the show live in higher quality anywhere, so you're not bound by a radio signal. Works inside office buildings great. Get the KABC app, get the KSFO app, and listen to us wherever you are.